Balance of Power, live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew. Tonight, it's a powerhouse lineup. Mayor Mamdani joins Bloomberg, New York City's new leader, pushing higher taxes on the wealthiest residents to close a mounting budget deficit. But will those hikes send rich residents packing? Mayor Mamdani sits down with Bloomberg's Myles just moments from now. Plus, let's make a deal. The government is one step closer to a partial shutdown this weekend after Democrats and a handful of Republicans vote down the House's funding package today. But a deal is still possible. President Trump seems optimistic.
Hopefully we won't have a shutdown. We're working on that right now. I think we're getting close. The Democrats, I don't believe, want to see it either. So we'll work in a very bipartisan way, I believe, not to have a shutdown. We don't want a shutdown.
We'll hear from both sides of the aisle this hour. Republican Senator Ted Budd, Democratic Senator Dick Durbin, both ahead. And Noem comment. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem notably silent at the first cabinet meeting of 2026 as Democrats ramp up calls for her resignation. How central is Noem's future to DHS reforms, now front and center in shutdown talks? We'll discuss. Plus, Apple's record quarter, unprecedented demand for the iPhone 17, fueling stronger than expected sales and earnings. The stock surging after hours, with more coming up in Power Moves with Romaine Bostick. We'll have that sit down with New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani in just a few moments. We thank you for joining. We begin with important developments, though, here in Washington, as the president today holds his first cabinet meeting of the year, making a few announcements on Venezuela and Ukraine, and importantly, acknowledging progress in negotiations with Democrats over new restrictions on ICE enforcement after a collection of funding bills, including the one for Homeland Security, failed in a procedural vote today in the Senate, setting the stage for a partial government shutdown tomorrow night. We go to Bloomberg's Kate Sullivan, who is live at the White House. Kate, do we have any sense of how close a deal may be?
Well, Trump is making it very clear today that he does not want the government to shut down. You know, what we do know is that discussions are underway right now about potentially splitting off some of this DHS funding from a broader spending bill, talking about potential limits on immigration agents. You know, this is all coming ahead of a Friday deadline, and Democrats have made very clear what they want to see in this deal. We do not yet have details about what the White House is going to agree to and what a potential deal will look like. But I do think that Trump's tone today and the comments that he made are notable. This is different from what we've heard in previous shutdowns. You know, he's explicitly saying this time that he does not want it to shut down, that he's going to work with Democrats on this, that they're working on a bipartisan solution. And so we'll definitely stay tuned.
This whole idea of a shutdown here and the pushback from Democrats and now some Republicans is centered around, of course, the fatal ICE shootings that have taken place in Minneapolis. We thought we might hear from Homeland Secretary Kristi Noem at that cabinet meeting today, Kate. He went around the table, called on many members of the cabinet, but not her. Does that mean that she's being sidelined, or is he trying not to make news while a deal is at hand?
That was definitely notable. You know, I should say that this cabinet meeting was a little bit different from previous cabinet meetings. Trump explicitly said that he wanted to keep this one a bit shorter. He didn't call on every single cabinet secretary, but many of them did speak. And I think it was notable that Noem was not one of those people. I think it's also notable, and it might actually be a first for Trump, that he did not take a single question after they wrapped up those comments at this meeting today. So as you mentioned, Noem is facing increasing pressure and backlash over this fatal shooting of Alex Preddy in Minneapolis over the weekend and the administration's response. So it's unclear how this is going to play out.
President did come packing with news while he did not talk about ICE enforcement or Minneapolis. He said that the skies were reopened over Venezuela, and he said that there was a new agreement with Vladimir Putin when it came to Ukraine. Let's listen.
I personally asked President Putin not to fire into Kiev and the various towns for a week, and he agreed to do that. And I have to tell you, it was very nice. A lot of people said, don't waste the call, you're not going to get that. And he did it, and we're very happy that they did it.
This is a pretty remarkable headline to be celebrating, Kate. Are we to believe then that Vladimir Putin will simply wait until next week to continue killing people?
It's a great question. Russia has continued to really pound Ukraine's critical infrastructure, leaving so many people without heat, without power in the dead of winter. I think it's definitely a notable announcement by the president. This is also happening as the U.S. is trying to broker a peace deal, a broader peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. We heard Witkoff today speak in the cabinet meeting, and again, projecting optimism there. But as it has been the case for many months now, there are still key sticking points and just no real sign that both sides are willing to compromise in any significant way that would actually lead to a peace agreement.
Kate, thank you so much. As always, Bloomberg's Kate Sullivan reporting live from a frigid White House North Lawn. It's been another busy after-hours trading session here in the throes of earnings reporting season. It's Apple tonight, quarterly results out after the bell, showing sales trouncing expectations. The stock rising after hours. It was up about 2.5%, now relaxing a bit to rise roughly 1%. For details, we turn to Power Moves with Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick, who joins us live from World Headquarters in New York. What do you make of the reaction, Romaine?
Yeah, Joe, imagine that you had just had your best year as a TV anchor and your boss just looked at you and shrugged. That's kind of what investors are doing right now, the idea that they want more, which says a lot. This is a company that just had a record quarter for iPhone sales. We're talking about $85 billion in revenue generated just off the iPhone alone in the last quarter. That's up 23% year over year. And it's not just the iPhone. You also had iPad revenue up 6%. You had you had services revenue up about 14%. And you have the company saying that right now there is an installed iPhone base of 2.5 billion people. But the big question is, what are they going to do with that installed base, Joe? The conference call is starting right now, and executives are almost certainly going to be peppered with questions as to what the company's AI strategy is. An AI strategy that, at least based on reporting from Mark Gurman and others here at Bloomberg, is likely going to revolve around the Siri voice messaging app and whether they can leverage the technology that's currently in there, as well as a new partnership with Alphabet's Google business to actually make that a little bit more relevant and potentially drive even more sales. So the story here is a company blowing off a lot of cash, returning a lot of value to shareholders, but shareholders, Joe, that just want to see a little bit more.
Interesting. Speaking of blowing off cash, look at Microsoft today. My goodness, that was not a very fun ride. Down 10% after earnings last evening. And Romaine, it seemed to take down the whole space. Anything close to software was in sell mode today. Are we to believe now, because of AI, nobody needs to buy software any longer? What's the sentiment?
There's a big question here. And software stocks have been under pressure for quite a few weeks now, primarily because of what you just said. The earnings out of Microsoft were really emblematic of that and the reaction to it. I do also want to draw your attention to a great interview that Caroline Hyde had with the CEO of ServiceNow, another application software company that reported and that kind of got caught in the downdraft. He was really defending the idea here that there still is utility and value in the businesses that they have. But when you look at those Microsoft earnings, specifically the Azure cloud services revenue there and the sort of softness that we're seeing there, that's supposed to be the bridge, Joe, to whatever this AI future is. But if there's softness there now, how can you bet that there's going to be strength later? Microsoft did not necessarily address those questions, at least not in the minds of investors. And that's why you saw it have its worst one-day drop since 2020.
Staggering. Not a good year to be comparing to either, Romaine. Thank you. We're a little more than halfway through the Mag 7. We'll be talking about them with Romaine as they emerge. Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick with Power Moves. Coming up, our live interview with New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani. That's next on Balance of Power, only here on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Thanks for joining us. He's been on the job for less than a month, but New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani has already experienced his first major winter storm, an Oval Office meeting with Donald Trump. He signed executive orders on affordable housing and more, and now making waves with a call for higher taxes on the wealthy to fix what he calls a fiscal crisis in the city. We are just moments away from our conversation with Mayor Mamdani. And we check in first with Bloomberg Opinion senior executive editor Tim O'Brien as we anticipate some of the commentary we're going to hear. Tim, it's great to see you and great to have you. When we first spoke on election night, following the early call for Zohran Mamdani, you pushed back on the idea of wealthy New York residents setting up camp in Miami, leaving town for some other place because of rising taxes and fears over what a self-described democratic socialist might bring to the table in New York. Has that happened yet?
Well, no, I don't think it's happened. And the main reason is because it's New York. You know, this is the greatest city in the world. I'm sure that's going to alienate a lot of people. I say that as somebody who grew up outside of Chicago, and I love the Midwest. But New York is a unique place, and there are a few cities around the world that are unique places. So people who leave New York and have been in New York for the things that make New York magical, particularly I think those at the highest end of the income ladder, I don't think they're just going to up and leave that easily. And I think Mamdani has a number of things challenging him on that front. He is trying to balance a budget. The New York City budget's about $120 billion. He is trying to address very obvious needs that New Yorkers of many income levels are struggling with around affordability, housing costs, healthcare costs, transportation costs, food costs, and the like. He's got to figure out how to make that math work. If the way they want to resolve it, however, is taxes on individuals, I think we have to have a reckoning. And this isn't just at the New York City level. This exists at the federal level, and it exists in most countries. The lion's share of the revenue for city budget comes from taxes on individuals. In New York City, it's about 30% of the annual revenue haul, whereas taxes on businesses are about 5%. Now, there's a very robust argument to be had about what that balance should look like and what the best way to go forward with that is. But I'm not sure that he's even going to be able to address some of the budget gaps he's facing with a wealth tax alone or a tax on the highest income New Yorkers. But New Yorkers are already heavily taxed.
Well, you help us set the baseline, Tim, and I'm glad that you're going to stay with us so we can compare notes after this important conversation here. As we turn now, at an important moment for the city of New York, to Bloomberg's Myles Miller, who is with the mayor right now at City Hall. Myles?
Joe, good evening. Yeah, here in the Blue Room in City Hall with Mayor Mamdani. Mayor, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming.
You know, we're going to talk a lot about Wall Street, talk about the budget, but first, get to a headline from the New York Post that says that the NYPD and sanitation were ordered to clear out some homeless encampments weeks before the cold. And of course, during that cold snap, we lost 10 New Yorkers. Can you just talk about anything you may know about that?
You know, what we have seen so far is that this cold snap might end up becoming the coldest period in recorded history in New York City. And it is a code blue here in New York City, which means that every time a New Yorker calls 311, we reroute that to 911. We're looking to bring everyone inside. And I'm proud of city workers that have connected about more than 600 homeless New Yorkers into shelter, safe havens, things of that nature, but the work continues. They're doing incredible work 24/7 getting out there. And that's the key, because right now it is far too cold to have anyone be outside.
You worried about not clearing encampments, or what's the approach you want to take to that?
I think the approach is that we are looking to make the outreach to each and every person to let them know that there's a safe haven, there's a shelter, there's a warming bus, there's a warming center at a hospital, all of these different options. And if we deem them to be a danger to themselves or to others, then we do also bring them in.
Yesterday, you presented a bleak outlook for the city's budget with a $12 billion deficit, the same week that Wall Street's reporting really strong bonuses. Walk me through that math. How does Wall Street actually help, and where's the rest coming from?
So Wall Street's announcement is something that is very encouraging and frankly will be helpful in dealing with a $12 billion fiscal deficit. The reason that I can't point to Wall Street and say that the deficit will be taken care of is simply the sheer scale of this deficit. We're talking about something that is larger, frankly, than what the city even faced during the Great Recession. And that's why it's going to require an all-of-the-above approach. That's why we welcome this news. We also think the city's relationship with the state has to change. You know, the city sends about 54.5%. It makes up the gross revenue of the state, only receives 40.5% in return. And we also think that the city's relationship with its wealthiest residents, most profitable corporations, also has to change so that we can bring this city back to firm financial footing. You know, as the mayor, I am legally required to balance the budget of this fiscal year and the next. That is something we are fully going to do. In order to do so, we have to deal with these structural problems.
You spoke about Eric Adams and Governor Andrew Cuomo, former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Where does the city council lay blame? State legislature? You didn't say anything about Donald Trump, who was president during some of this period of sort of instability as well.
I think there's no question that we are talking about a city's fiscal health also in the context of threatened cuts coming from the federal administration. Those are cuts that we're going to fight with every single tool in our toolbox. However, the $12 billion fiscal deficit, when it comes to the architects of that deficit, we're talking about the former mayor and the former governor. The reason for this is that the former mayor would under budget the costs of actual city services. We're talking about when it comes to access to shelter, or we're talking about cash assistance, sometimes even only budgeting half of the cost, or 60% of the cost. And then here we are seeing a deficit grow to a level we haven't seen before. And amidst all of that, adding close to $2 billion in new expenses. That's the kind of gross fiscal mismanagement that we're talking about.
I want to, you talked a little bit about, the potential of these cuts. Saturday is the day where President Trump said sanctuary cities who don't change their policies could see cuts. Federal aid is about $8 to $10 billion annually for the city. What kind of conversations have you been having either with Washington, the White House, or here at City Hall about what the potential of those cuts could be come Saturday?
Well, I think we make very clear that our laws and our values are not bargaining chips. We are proud of what we have here in place in New York City. We will defend it, and we will defend New Yorkers. And look, the president said after our meeting in the Oval Office that the better New York does, the happier he is. And my job as the mayor of New York City is to make clear what these kinds of proposed cuts would do to this city that we both love. They would devastate this city. And so we're going to fight those kinds of threats. And also to make very clear that we have to prepare for every single eventuality, which is why it's so critical to not just turn to all of your reserves and say we can use this for one fiscal deficit if you know that the horizon is one that includes threats of this nature. You have to put yourself on a firm financial footing and ensure that you have the kind of reserves to prepare for a day like this.
Yeah, you told us a couple of weeks ago that you texted with the president. I want to go to another texting buddy of yours, the governor. You guys have had a really interesting relationship. Are you predicating a potential endorsement of her for her run for re-election on being able to raise taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers?
Look, I appreciate the relationship that I've been building with Governor Hochul. And frankly, what we've seen from Governor Hochul is a new kind of politics when it comes to New York City, right? I'm talking about the prior governor and what he created in this fiscal imbalance. And I'm proud to say in just 8 days of our administration, we were on stage together, the governor and I, announcing more than $1 billion in funding for universal child care. So I think that what we have now is the potential to address a crisis that has been years, if not more than a decade in the making, and to show New Yorkers that we will be able to resolve a fiscal crisis and do so while advancing an affordability agenda.
Let's talk about what has moved markets in the past, and that's, of course, big decisions when it comes to Uber and Lyft and all of that. We reported on some of the junk fee crackdowns, some of the regulations within your first month, and some of the work that you were doing with trying to get out junk fees and be upfront about them as it relates to the World Cup. Tell us about your economic approach, and will you be trying to work with business versus, looking for these areas to sort of penalize them?
Absolutely. We're looking to work with business. And what I've also heard from a number of business owners is a sense of exhaustion and frustration that if they play by the rules, they have to watch while another business operates with impunity. And then they lose their market share as a result of that. And so part of the motivation here is not just to protect workers and consumers, but also businesses that are operating within the bounds of the law. And that's what it looks like when we hold businesses that are flouting those laws accountable. And so I think this is a time when, whether it comes to being honest about the fiscal deficit or honest about the regulations that we have, we want to be very straightforward. I think we're proud of the legacy of this city in generating prosperity. We want that prosperity to reach every New Yorker's life. And that's how we're going to approach this question of economic development and ensure that we make it easier to not just start a business here, but to keep that business open. And I'll just give you one more example. There are a number of real estate leaders who had shared with me the difficulties they have to go through to build housing in this city. We need to build more housing. The housing crisis is the preeminent crisis in this city. And so that's why we've supported measures like SECRA reform, making it easier to go through that regulation so you can actually build that building much sooner. That's why when I hear from a real estate developer that they have to go to 6 different agencies to fill one single tree pit, we're looking at that as an example of what government could be doing better.
Do you look at business as a partner with government? You know, we've looked at the nature of private-public partnerships, obviously a lot of partnerships with JP Morgan as it relates to NYCHA and all of that. How will you approach that economic development lens? Will it be through trying to bring business into blighted neighborhoods, or will it be a focus on union jobs and union workers, a sort of different approach to economic development?
I think for far too long we've been told that these are the only choices. And the choice that I'll be making is to look at business as a partner and also to bring labor to the same table, to ensure that workers are also benefiting from this. I'll give you an example of something that I've looked at as the kind of thing that New York City should be doing more of. The partnership that NYCHA had in creating clean energy within NYCHA developments. They put out an RFP where they were able to bring in heat pumps into Woodside houses. These are heat pumps that transform the quality of life, reduce the cost of energy, and this is a clear example of what we could be doing to resolve some of the long-standing issues in this city. And I think that when I sit down with a business leader, sure, we might disagree on fiscal policy where I want to tax millionaires by an additional 2%, and I want New York State's most profitable corporations to pay a little bit more in taxes. But what we don't disagree on is the importance of the city, the vitality of the city, and how it's going to take all of us to win that future. And I look forward to doing that.
Did you meet with Jamie yet?
No, but we've spoken on the phone.
And one last thing, you know, last night you were at 770 Eastern Parkway. You know, Chabad was very important to me when I was in college. They kept me fed, and they do quite a lot for the community. So to see that act of anti-Semitism, what effect did that have on you? And then secondly, you know, Councilwoman Ina Vernikov has been named one of the chairs of the anti-Semitism committee in the council. She said some vile stuff about you. She said that you want to see Jews in an oven and you're a terrorist lover. Can you just tell me, you know, how do those comments make you feel? We often see you react, but not. I would just love to know how that makes you feel. I saw you 2 Sundays ago at the Africa Cup situation, and you were in a room full of, you know, mostly people who are immigrants from Africa. And when they hear those comments, they must feel the same way that you feel. So how did these comments make you feel? And with the incident that happened yesterday, like what was going through your mind meeting with those people?
Well, I think I'll start with yesterday. You know, it was a horrifying incident where we saw a man intentionally and repeatedly crash his car into the Chabad headquarters. And we know that this occurred, frankly, on a day that was one of immense significance to Jewish New Yorkers and people across the world. We're talking about the yard site of Rabbi Schneierson. And this is a moment when many Jewish New Yorkers are seeing anti-Semitism rise across the city and across this country. And as the mayor of this city, we are committed to rooting out anti-Semitism from across the 5 boroughs. And I was thankful that no one was injured, and also to be there and to speak with a number of Jewish New Yorkers to make it clear that this city has their back, whether we're speaking about right there at the Chabad headquarters or anywhere across the city. And I think to your earlier question, you know, there
must weigh on you. You're the first Muslim mayor of this city, which is largely becoming majority minority.
I think it's the difficulty of this is that I know that there are so many in this city who have to deal with similar kinds of smears. And it is all too easy to allow that to color the way that you approach any one issue. But what I know that New Yorkers want to see, what I want to see, is a humanity embodied in our politics, not the language of darkness that has taken hold. And what that humanity requires is to look at each and every New Yorker and say that they are equally deserving of safety, of joy, of belonging in a city that is theirs. And I can tell you, as someone who came to the city at the age of 7, who got my citizenship in the city, who grew up in the city, that we will not engage in a debate of who belongs here any longer. We will instead engage in the act of delivering for each and every person who calls it home.
Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Joe, I'll send it back to you.
Bloomberg's Myles Miller and New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani. Myles, thank you so much for a fascinating conversation. As we get back with Bloomberg Opinion's senior executive editor, Tim O'Brien. Really remarkable, Tim, to hear the mayor refer to what he called to gross fiscal mismanagement accusing the Eric Adams administration of under-budgeting costs for programs, intentionally creating this massive deficit that he's trying to get his arms around. How many friends is the mayor going to make with this effort?
Well, I mean, does anyone make friends when you have to make the math add up? And some people are going to be deprived of services. Other people are going to be taxed more heavily to fill the gap. Right now, we're relying on the Mayor Mamdani's administration's assertion that the $13 billion gap was left by Eric Adams. Let's presume it was. Let's also think about that in the context of Mamdani saying that he is legally required to balance a budget. It would seem that some of the gimmickry, if it did happen in the Adams administration, was, at best sleight of hand, possibly deeply irresponsible, and I'll leave it there. But basically, they underfunded services, education, and a lot of other things that average New Yorkers rely on. And now he's required to make up for that shortfall, in addition to having very ambitious goals for more affordable housing, free buses, and some of the other things that he campaigned on.
Yeah. Tim, thanks for being part of the program, as always, this evening. Bloomberg Opinion Senior Executive Editor Tim O'Brien helping us with some context around that conversation. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. We're now less than 30 hours away from a partial government shutdown after a procedural vote in the Senate today ended like this.
On this vote, the yeas are 45, the nays are 55. 3/5 of the Senate duly chosen and sworn, not having voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to. That
was the sound of a cloture vote on a series of funding bills failing after Democrats refused to allow the bills to move ahead with DHS funding included, remembering, of course, the impact of what happened over the weekend in Minneapolis. Democratic senators demanding DHS funding be stripped out of that funding bill, calling for ICE reforms to be included in the language of the bill. But will they shut down the government over it is the question. Joining us now with his reaction, live from Capitol Hill, Republican Senator Ted Budd of North Carolina, who was a no vote on that cloture motion just a few hours ago. He serves on both the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senate Commerce Committee. And Senator, I want to thank you for being so patient and waiting for our conversation. It's good to see you. You were a no today. Does that mean that you have hope for a deal? The president is acknowledging progress in talks with Democrats about some new restrictions that would be codified in legislative form to keep this moving forward.
I do. What we're going to hear now is we're going to see a 6-bill package, which ultimately failed a few hours ago, is going to move to a 5-bill package. That should pass in the next several days. And then a continuing resolution for the Department of Homeland Security portion. That should give us several weeks to work on that. I think Tom Homan's doing a great job in Minneapolis. Even though he's only hours into the role, there's great hope for that. And I think that gives all of us hope that there's going to be some very productive negotiations to get that through. But I will say this, shutting down DHS, as a lot of Democrats have talked about, it hurts the Coast Guard, it hurts TSA, it doesn't get at the DHS funding, which is ultimately what their concern is. I mean, that was in the Working Families Tax Cut Act of July 4th last year, and that's going to fund that for years to come.
Well, what brought you to a no then today? Was it because you are optimistic about a deal taking place? Why not put these in motion and then follow up with legislation to add those restrictions later?
No, and I want to compliment the negotiators, Susan Collins on our side, putting together a package that's much better, much more regular order, where we've had 12 different bills that we've been able to weigh in on. However, they were rolled together in a couple of 6-bill packages. I'd like them to be able to be voted on separately. I think that would be a more open process where you can get at amendments. Some of the things I would have worked on stripping out of that is earmarks that fund abortion facilities or fund transgender care for children. I think that's a non-starter for me and most folks back in the overwhelming amount of folks back in North Carolina. That's not something we should be spending taxpayer dollars or any dollars on. So that was in the package, and that was what earned a no vote from me.
Really interesting. You had a lengthy statement on Twitter that we've been talking about here on Bloomberg, in which you called for an investigation into Alex Preddy's killing by agents last weekend. To what extent do you want to see a reassessment at ICE when it comes to rules on the ground? You mentioned that you think Tom Homan is doing a good job. Is he starting on the right foot in Minneapolis? What needs to be in that bill? Body cameras, more training. What else?
Well, body cameras for sure, and there's already funding, and that's already out there, millions of dollars for body camera, and of course training. These law enforcement officers, and I want to give them credit where it's due, they have to make split-second decisions. I'm very sympathetic to them, but you always want to look at a tragedy like this, and I do want to call it a tragedy anytime there's a death like this and something got escalated to that point. I just think it's fair to all involved, including law enforcement, that you take a look at this and how could this be prevented in the future. And I think Homan, he's an experienced law enforcement officer. He was appointed under Trump as a border czar. He did a similar role for Obama, so he's not necessarily he's a tough figure, but he's not a partisan figure, and I think he'll be the right one to lead the charge.
Senator, should Tom Homan replace Kristi Noem as the Secretary of Homeland Security then?
I've got a good working relationship with the secretary. My focus is through the lenses of North Carolina. She was able to clear the deck for hundreds of millions of dollars for Western North Carolina, even though that's about 15 months ago when Hurricane Helene ripped through our mountains and did untold damage. She's been focused on help us get that back up to speed. There's debris still to be removed. There's counties to be reimbursed. And I have a productive relationship there. So I really think that's a decision for the president to make regarding his cabinet.
Well, as we watch ICE arrive in many cities around the country, realizing that this is a fluid story and deployments could be changing, whether it's in Maine or whether it's in Charlotte, in your state of North Carolina, is it time for a drawback in the presence that we're seeing around the country, as Tom Homan suggested for Minneapolis?
Well, I think people are okay with enforcement, but they don't like the tactics. And let's make them less visceral. Let's make them effective. And I think his prioritization, which is what Trump wanted to start with during his campaign, and that is the worst, those that are bringing crime to our areas. That's what we really need to focus on. Everyone probably knows somebody that is here from another country. Maybe they didn't come in the right way. Look, we'll deal with that. And I think being here illegally is a problem. But you want to make sure you differentiate between those that came here the right way. They have the best of intentions. They're coming and being a part of this great America that we know and that we love, and they make this a better country. We want to differentiate between those folks that are here legally, those that are here illegally, and those that are here illegally and that are here to commit crimes. So I think you need to start with those folks, the worst folks that have brought fentanyl, they've trafficked drugs, they've trafficked humans, and have led to a lot of loss of lives. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people over the past several years from fentanyl alone. And a lot of that comes from illegals that have trapped across our border.
Yeah. Senator, I want to just put a finer point procedurally on what should happen here. If there's a CR for DHS, you pass the other 5, CR for DHS should be how long? How much time do you need to find the details of a deal?
Well, my understanding is that we need more than 2 weeks because of the Senate procedures. I wish you could, I come from a business background, you just get it done, but there's procedures to be done here in the Senate. It's a very interesting body politic. So it's going to take more than 2 weeks, but we'll hurry with whatever time they get us. But let's remember, if you shut down DHS, you don't get at what the Democrats are actually after, and that is DHS alone, where it actually affects Coast Guard, it affects TSA, it affects FEMA, and that's something that not only affects Western North Carolina, it would affect Peter Welch in Vermont, who has FEMA needs as well. So I think we should be very measured in how we approach this. I think we're going to come to a good conclusion.
Really great to spend some time with you, Senator. Thank you. Republican Ted Budd of North Carolina. Thanks for being back with us on Bloomberg. As we get to some breaking news now, this just went red on the terminal. Bloomberg News reporting Elon Musk's SpaceX is said to be considering a merger with Tesla or an alternative combination with artificial intelligence company xAI. That's Musk's AI firm. It's a sign that Elon Musk is weighing how to consolidate his empire as Wall Street anticipates a SpaceX IPO this year, one of the biggest deals looming. According to people familiar with the matter, the tie-up between SpaceX and Tesla is an idea that some investors are now pushing. Separately, also exploring tie-ups between SpaceX and xAI ahead of an IPO. We're getting more on this as we speak. Be sure to head to the terminal for a full report. President Trump, during that cabinet meeting we talked about earlier today in Washington, provided this update on his administration's plan to help Congress avoid a partial government shutdown, which, based on our conversation with Senator Budd, appears to be a foregone conclusion tomorrow. Take a listen.
Hopefully we won't have a shutdown. We're working on that right now. I think we're getting close. The Democrats, I don't believe, want to see it either. So we'll work in a very bipartisan way. I believe not to have a shutdown. We don't want a shutdown.
Meantime, on the Democratic side, California Governor Gavin Newsom says congressional Democrats had no choice but to shut down over the killings in Minneapolis. Here's what he told Bloomberg a short time ago.
It's not an option.
Well, it is an option.
It's not an option.
It could happen tomorrow night.
Not an option. You want your republic. You want to save its democracy. You want to enjoy the 250th anniversary, maybe make the 251st anniversary of the historic project of our founding fathers. It's not an option.
Now, as we just discussed with Ted Budd, a couple of different things could happen here, but the most likely scenario at the moment seems to be, with this 6-bill package, splitting them apart, isolating the Department of Homeland Security, which Democrats and Republicans like Ted Budd are not prepared to pass following the deadly killings in Minneapolis. With our eyes on the Capitol, right now, this is where this is all taking place, of course, that would resolve into a government shutdown unless a CR is put in place for that single department, Homeland Security. Joining us with his reaction live now from the Hill is Democratic Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, ranking member on the Senate Judiciary Committee, also serves on the Senate Appropriations Committee. Senator Durbin, it's always great to have you on Bloomberg TV and radio, and we thank you for the time. Are you banking on a shutdown? And if that's the case, do you think there will be a deal on DHS funding shortly thereafter?
There was a solid vote today. Every Democrat, and including, I think, 7 Republicans, voted to make sure that we're not going to consider this package without splitting out the appropriation for the Department of Homeland Security. That vote has taken place. It was 45-55, I believe, was the final vote. It was decisive by Senate standards. The question now remains, what will happen to the Department of Homeland Security? What we said from the start, it's not just splitting it out, but it's making sure there are changes made in the procedures and operations of that department. Those killings in Minneapolis have galvanized America into belief that we have to be certain that this agency, as well as other agencies, but certainly ICE, has to follow the law and the Constitution.
Are you comfortable with the continuing resolution for DHS that we just discussed with Senator Budd, something longer than 2 weeks in duration? Is that time needed to strike a deal with the president?
That time is not needed. 2 weeks are enough. Okay. And only for negotiations, serious negotiations. I've been around Washington for a few years, and I can tell you, if you want to get the job done, 2 weeks is more than enough time. I'm making no promise beyond that 2-week period.
So what are you hearing then? Reportedly, Chuck Schumer is in direct negotiations with the president to establish the need for body cameras, additional training, and to end roving squads of ICE patrols. Are those all going to be in a deal, Senator? And what else do you need to see?
They would be on my list, but I am not a negotiator at this point. What I want to tell you is this. Chuck Schumer has been empowered by this caucus to sit down and negotiate on our behalf, to make sure when it's all said and done that what we've seen, the outrageous conduct we've seen by ICE in Minneapolis and Chicago and other cities comes to an end immediately.
You said recently, a couple days ago, that Secretary Kristi Noem was going to appear before your Judiciary Committee, I believe, the 3rd of March. Do you believe she will still have the job by then?
Well, I can tell you this. I hope she's not looking for a vote of confidence from me. I tried to get her before the Senate Judiciary Committee all of last calendar year. She was just too darn busy to appear before Congress. Now she's given us this notice that she might be around in 5 weeks. That is not the kind of arrogance that endears you to members of Congress of either political party. The notion that we're going to give her an appropriation bill that basically has no restrictions on it is not a good one from her point of view.
Well, how important is it that she be replaced at the top of the agency in the spirit of crafting a deal? Are Democrats demanding she step down?
I'm not making that part of the demand list, and I don't know if anyone is, but I'll tell you this. I think she has mismanaged this agency. 2 innocent people were killed as a result of it, and we have to make some changes in ICE and make them as quickly as possible.
There's a lot to get your arms around right now in Washington, Senator. Once this is complete, let's assume it's a best-case scenario. You get a 2-week CR on DHS funding, and the government is open and moving along fine as we work our way into February. Now that we're going into the midterm campaign cycle, what's left on the agenda? President Trump hasn't said a lot to members of Congress about what should be coming. We hear much more about executive actions and geopolitics from the White House when he's not trying to address affordability. I guess I'm asking if the store is closed once funding is settled.
Well, it certainly should not be. We can take pride in the fact that we have bipartisan appropriation bills for 96% of the government, which are about to be approved. We still have one remaining area, of course, the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, and those related agencies. When it comes to the fact that we did the other work, I think we did good work. But the bottom line is the affordability issue, which the president has even denied existing, is a very serious concern for American families. They want to know what Democrats and Republicans have on the table to change their lives for the better. Those issues are front and center.
Mm-hmm. You know, there is some area of overlap in the spirit of cooperation, Senator, I'll point out, between you and President Trump, and it comes to your Credit Card Competition Act. What do you make of his call to cap interest rates at 10%? Is there going to be enough support to make that happen legislatively?
From my point of view, a pleasant surprise, but the Republicans are in the majority, and they set the agenda in the committees and on the floor. The decision was made not to call that measure today in the Agriculture Committee. That decision by Senator Marshall, I respect. He's my partner in this effort. But frankly, the Republicans and the president have to decide if these issues are going to come up for a vote.
Well, we do appreciate that, Senator. Democratic Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois. Thank you for the insights, as always, in the time this evening on Bloomberg. California Governor Gavin Newsom sat down with Bloomberg Business Week editor Brad Stone earlier this afternoon for an in-depth conversation. We just showed you a second of it, in which they discussed the governor's plan to push back against the Trump administration. Let's listen.
What more evidence do we need? It's a stacking of all of these things. He is not screwing around. He tried to light democracy on fire when he lost the election, tried to light it on fire, tried to destroy this democracy. He's trying to ruin our republic. He's trying to torch it. What more evidence do we need on a day-to-day basis? All of this is part of that same narrative, that same thread. It's tragic what's happening. A 5-year-old angelic young boy used as leverage and collateral. This madness, masked men, not even identifying themselves, no warrants, terrorizing communities. People dying, quite literally now dying. We said people will die. People are dying in the United States of America. And what is the threat today, to your question? Well, do what we legally can't do, or we'll continue to illegally do what we've been doing by terrorizing your community, by turning over people in local jails or whatever the hell else we want as points of leverage. None of this can be normalized, and none of this can be considered credible in the context of any of this renewed posture of the administration.
You talked about what the National Guard did in California last year. Do you worry that your continued emergence as a critic, as an antagonist of Trump, will bring the same pain that we're seeing in Minnesota back to California?
Well, I mean, I guess we can roll over, kiss the ring, put on some knee pads, do what the universities, the law firms, do what ABC did, Paramount did, do what Meta did, YouTube did, do what so many companies are doing. Maybe get a golden share in the Golden State. I mean, seriously. And just watch it all disappear. I guess we can do that, or we can stand on principle, the rule of law, not the rule of dawn. I hope it's dawning on all of you. It's the rule of dawn. There are no co-equal branches of government. We have a supine Congress. The only approximation of a co-equal branch of government is the markets. Thank you, the markets. I mean, Bloomberg. It's the only thing he seems to pay attention to. He doesn't even pay attention to court orders. You saw that, the federal judge today. I mean, 96 specific attempts to completely deny court order, just since he's been involved in this operation in Minnesota. This is code red. But it's become so normalized. It's in our bloodstream.
You can find Bloomberg's full conversation with the California Governor, Gavin Newsom, online and on the terminal. I'm going to stay in California for a moment to check in with Bloomberg Tech's Ed Ludlow in San Francisco, joining us live now for an important conversation with the CEO of PG&E, Patti Poppe. Ed, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And as part of that conversation with the governor here in this building, inevitably, California's largest utility that serves the vast majority of the state's population came up. And essentially, the governor was asked, well, what do you think of the job that they're doing? Let's just play first what Governor Newsom had to say.
Accountability is a persistent issue and continues to need to be improved. But I'm not convinced, and forgive me, I'm not, that a state that finally has turned and is turning DMV around wants to get in the utility business.
Yeah. PG&E CEO Patti Poppe, he was in the building, and it's only right that we give you the sort of opportunity to respond. But in summary, California does not have the appetite to take on a utility like that. But the context is the San Francisco blackouts. And also, I think, it's written into state law that if there were to be a disaster, I think operationally speaking, not financially necessarily, that the state could do that. There's a legal mechanism. But please, just your interpretation of what he said.
Well, I think it might have been one of the nicest things he's ever said about us, that we might be able to do our job better than the state of California could. Look, we have to earn the right to serve every day. That's not granted, and I don't ever want my team to think that it is granted legally or that by the law is the reason why we get to serve. We are privileged to serve the people of California every day, and I'm proud to say we're making very significant progress. Reliability improved 20% last year. Our rates are down. We lowered prices by 11% since 2024, 4 reductions since 2024. Look, when prices can be down and service can be up, our wildfire safety has never been better. The system has never been safer. Those are all the makings of regaining trust from our customers.
Basically from Santa Barbara County up to Crescent City, on the border. And I'm a PG&E customer who should be, transparent with the audience about that. People like Tom Steyer, talk about this being a monopoly that should be broken up. The city of San Francisco believes it could run its own utility or grid better than you could. Why are they wrong?
Look, I've been at the company now for 5 years. The company has embarked on a real transformation. People lost confidence in us, but we're regaining that trust and that confidence by, again, improving our performance every day. I do believe the business model for the investor-owned utility is the lowest cost way to build infrastructure at scale and keep prices affordable. We are lowering prices. That's been a very important turnaround for our company. And as we improve the service, make it safer, make it more affordable, we can then build the infrastructure to serve growing load from AI and robotics and new technologies. Building the power infrastructure for that can be done at scale with the investor-owned utility model, and we have to earn that right, and I'm up for it. We're earning it every day.
Compare and contrast what we've just seen in the East Coast with severe cold. What we experience in this state is the wildfire risk, right? And you keep saying that you're bringing rates down. The way that the consumer is given it, they're told prices are such that it reflects the cost of guarding against wildfire. Do you accept that as a base level understanding of what everyday Californians believe their electricity pricing to reflect?
Well, I think what is surprising to people is as we build infrastructure to keep them safer, we can lower prices. Those two things aren't in conflict. For example, we have today built 1,200 miles of underground power lines. That costs customers about $1.75 a month. They think it costs a lot more than that, but $1.75 a month for customers to have 1,200 miles of buried power lines, 1,400 miles of overhead hardened lines, and we can then shift from vegetation management. What surprises people, undergrounding power lines costs $1.75 a month. Doing vegetation management costs $22 a month. That should be alarming to you, Ed, as my customer. $22 a month for vegetation management. That's
I live in Marin County. I see it.
The history has been maintenance, Band-Aids, throw money at repairs. We want to build infrastructure that actually keeps you safe, powered when we don't only have wildfire, we have atmospheric rivers, we have massive snows up in the Sierras and the Santa Cruz Mountains. We need to make sure that we have infrastructure built for purpose, and that actually will cost customers less than what they have to pay today to keep it safe.
This logic is fascinating, right? Like, I host our technology show. Yeah. My focus on a daily basis is data centers. Your team put out research January 6th, I think it was, that basically said that data centers, they cited Amazon's data center design, could actually result in prices coming down.
Yes.
Do you stand by that data?
Yes, absolutely, because as we grow demand on the grid, we can actually lower the unit cost for every customer. So more kilowatts share the use of the grid, every kilowatt
costs less.
But
you see the hyperscaler or data center owner taking the burden. Is that?
And that's all about pricing.
Someone's got to pay for it.
Somebody has to pay for it. They have to pay for it, but their utilization of the grid actually makes it more affordable for everyone else. I do think this problem is quite simple. People, there's a lot of talk about, does building out data center infrastructure raise costs for everyone? Not when you, number one, price it right, and two, we haven't grown load on our grid in decades. This new demand actually will fund the rebuilding of an aged infrastructure. We actually need these data centers and their new revenue. The part that people don't talk about, they talk about the cost to build the infrastructure. They forget about the revenue that comes with that infrastructure. And that revenue then funds the rebuilding of the grid, not only for that location, but more broadly as we replace aging infrastructure.
You know, we have a time limit here, but Bloomberg did deep reporting on the zip codes where a data center is built and what happens to pricing afterwards, and in most cases it goes up. Let's take San Jose, for example, right? There is clearly a commitment in that city to be a home to data centers. Yes. How prepared are you? And how worried? Like, Patti, you've been a refreshingly honest interviewee, you know, and I just tell the audience what the reality is of us doing this in California.
Yeah, it's very exciting. We are thrilled to add the infrastructure for San Jose and the broader Bay Area and across our system. And we are showing for every gigawatt of new demand we add to the grid, we can lower rates 1%.
Can you guarantee it?
Well, we put it in our rate proceedings. We've put it into our rate filing that we filed we filed last year for 2027 through 2030. We show with those infrastructure investments we recommend with that filing, rates would be flat from 2025 to 2027.
Videos all over social media of Waymos stuck at cross lights, not sure what to do when all the lights in San Francisco went out. What did PG&E get wrong in that? Was it technology? Was it legacy infrastructure?
Yeah, that was actually infrastructure that has been maintained, invested in. In fact, we've invested over $200 million in that substation alone. We had inspected it in December. We are still doing the investigation to find out what exactly caused the fire. But what I am going to tell you is that within 3 hours of us getting access to that building, when the fire was out and we were able to safely access the building, within 3 hours, 75% of the customers were restored because our electricians, our electric line workers, our engineers from across our system were able to engage and basically rewire San Francisco in 3 hours. I'm proud of the team for their response. We'll find out what happened and we'll fix what happened and make sure it doesn't happen again. But in an emergency like that, to have that kind of team response, I'm proud of them.
We didn't get a chance to talk about Diablo Canyon, but you're going to speak to my colleagues about that, I'm sure. So we'll let you go. But thank you for coming in and reacting to our state's governor here at Bloomberg San Francisco. Joe, back to you.
Ed, thank you so much. Fascinating conversation. You can catch Ed Ludlow every morning, alongside Caroline Hyde. You know that. Bloomberg Tech starts 11 a.m. Eastern every weekday. Check out the Washington Edition newsletter. Following the program, you can find it on the terminal and online with a lot to prepare for tomorrow. I hope you'll be with us. We're going to make tracks up to Capitol Hill and see if anybody's left by the time we take air at 5 p.m. Eastern time. So I do hope you'll join us with a government shutdown apparently in the works. We talk with a Democrat and a Republican this hour to give you the lay of the land on what might be happening next with a 6-bill package today that failed in the United States Senate. They're going to take another swing at this, it appears, with a continuing resolution in place of a deal for the Department of Homeland Security. And when everybody comes back next week, negotiations will get real. Maybe we'll get a breakthrough tomorrow. We'll have to find out together. And I'll meet you back here then. Thanks for joining us on Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. This is Bloomberg.